That's okay. It's okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Tom Davis. I'm a recent elected elder to the Derry Presbyterian Church. It's my pleasure this morning to talk to you about several mission trips that I have taken over the past years. My mission experience began as a Rotarian in the year 2004 when I was serving as district governor in the Rotary District 7390. Our team went to Brazil, and I had just a wonderful experience meeting the doctors and especially the patients that we operated on during that experience. I followed that up with another Rotary trip in Mexico in 2006. However, the essence of this morning talk will be two mission adventures, one in Ghana and the other in India. And I must give credit to my brother. My brother is older. He is also a plastic surgeon. And when your brother encourages you to do something, you follow. In other words, he actually told me I better go along with him. So my brother, had been traveling to India for many years. I think he had been on maybe 20 mission trips, and he had such a wonderful experience. He thought that I should be part of that experience. And I remember the first time I went to India in 2007. It was an amazing experience, a typical mission. We stayed in terrible hotels. The food was terrible. India was overwhelming with the people, the sights, the sounds. I told him I don't think I'll ever go back. And yet 13 years later, I continued the trip and just fell in love with India. But I think since we have the flag of Ghana here, I should start with my experience in Ghana. My brother and groups from his church in York, Pennsylvania, and also the First Presbyterian Church in York would take trips every September. We began September in 2007, and unfortunately, we concluded our trips in the year 2013 due to the Ebola crisis in Ghana. But I'd just like to share briefly with you this morning our experience with our mission trips to Ghana. So that was the national flag of Ghana, and this is the pathway from the United States to Ghana. We would fly to Accra, which is the capital of Ghana, and this was early on, even after 9/11. I always have the habit of taking a box of golden almonds for the pilots whenever I fly, and a bag of Hershey Kisses for the cabin crew. Well, this particular time, it allowed me to go right up to the cockpit and meet with the pilots. And interestingly, I have a military background in the service, in the Navy, and it's not unusual that the pilots all have come from the military. So it was very easy to sit in the cockpit and talk to the pilots and have a wonderful experience before takeoff. This is the picture of our group unloading, and it was a large group because we did not only the medical mission, but we had on our team, we had teachers would teach in the local schools, and we had people that were doing construction, building shelves and things for the hospital and the local area. So we're unpacking, and this is the area where we went. Apam is a small seacoast town halfway between Accra and Cape Coast, which are the two ends of the coastline of Ghana. It is a Catholic hospital, and we were greeted as we reached the area, and so here we are, and of course we get all the villagers out with all the paraphernalia, all the colorful costumes. And then this is Sister Mary. Sister Mary is the chief nurse anesthetist, and she became sort of the highlight of our time in the operating room. And this is our waiting room, very casual. We would usually arrive on a Sunday, and they would have maybe 100 or 200 patients already pre-screened, meaning that they had had all their laboratory tests, and if my brother and I, who were doing the triage, felt that we were capable of operating and doing something to help them, we would then sign them up for surgery. So our idea was that in the beginning on Sunday, we would take the most difficult cases and do them first, because then we would have a week and a half to follow them up. And then we would take what were usually the more simple cases that we could do in and out, would require overnight in the hospital. We would leave those cases to the very end, and knowing that the local doctors were able and capable of taking care of them after we left. So we didn't want to do anything major toward the end and then leave a situation that was not very helpful to the local doctors. So this was our patient, and I must say, as a doctor, it was wonderful to be in this situation where we didn't have any lawyers worrying about opt-consents and all the different signatures and all the whatever you had to do. We just had people that were just so happy that we were there to help them, and the fact that, you know, there's no money or anything like that, it was just fun to help people and just be satisfied and gratified just by their overwhelming gratitude of what we were able to do for them. And we didn't, I mean, we were just doing normal surgery, but they were just so grateful for what we were able to do. So this is the operating room, and again, Ghana, I call it a third world country, but what I'm trying to tell you is that it wasn't unusual that the power would go off and we'd have to get flashlights out or whatever to finish the surgery. So that happened on several occasions. But we had a wonderful crew locally, and we also brought several of our own into the operating room. We had an operating room nurse, an assistant, and so forth. Again, here we are in the operating room with Sister Mary. She was lovely. And this is just a group of pictures of the people around the town. Francis was the head of the hospital and our guide there. Here is Cardinal Peter Turkson, probably one of the few cardinals from Africa. And every year we went to Ghana, one of the highlights was to have lunch at his residence. And he was great because he'd show up, or we would show up, and he'd be in all his cardinal vestments. But then he'd say, "Are all the pictures taken? Because I want to get in my jeans and sweatshirt." So he would, after all the pictures were taken, then he would be one of us and just join us. And he was just wonderful. And I have to say that if there is ever a cardinal from Africa that would be elevated to the position of Pope, he has my vote. Just a wonderful man. And interestingly, I don't know that much about the Catholic Church and the Pope and everything, but he shared with us that all the popes have a church in Rome, so that when they are, if they are elevated, they have come from Rome. I had no clue. I didn't know anything about that, and so I had actually gone to Rome on several medical, just ordinary medical meetings, and I arranged to have coffee with him in Rome at his church, so it was really nice. This is the Methodist church in Ghana. So my brother's Methodist, and this is their big church. And it's interesting, it's a lovely church, and this town, I'll show you pictures later of the town and some of the poverty, but on Sunday, I couldn't believe how beautifully dressed the women were, with clean outfits, fancy hats, and absolutely stunning. And then you think, how did they do that? It's just amazing. And this is the collection. So my brother warned me, because he had been there a year before I started, and they collect offering 3 times. So you have to be very careful that you don't give it all at one time. So you have to leave a little bit toward the end. And the funny thing for me was that the choir, we're very blessed to have wonderful choir gowns here, but in Ghana, the choir gowns were like graduation cap and gown, so they had the cap, the mortarboard, and the gown, and they paraded around. And they actually, when they were collecting, they just sang and danced, and it was a very wonderful, heartwarming ceremony. Now, here is the city of Apam, and the city, and really a town, I hesitate to call it a city. Right on the seacoast, their major industry was fishing. But it's just interesting. We have so much here, and then you just, all of a sudden, you're taken to another area, and you see how lucky we are that we have housing, fresh water, indoor plumbing, This is a sewing factory, showing the old sewing machines. And the kids, you know, every time you go on a mission, and Pete, I know you have the same experience that I have experienced, and that's the children, no matter how poor they are, they're all so happy and smiley and so pleasant and just wonderful to be around. This is the city water well and all the different vegetables. Now I must say that the best pineapple I have ever tasted was the pineapple I tasted in Ghana. And we would have that for breakfast every morning, and I don't know what the difference was, but I just know it was the best pineapple I ever had. So this is the catching of the fish in the nets. And they didn't have the refrigeration. They used to smoke the fish so that it would be lasting longer. But just amazing, the crude boats and how they survived. Just amazing. And this is just an overview of the town. You can see some substantial buildings, but they're, you know, they go around and you can see the grass shacks and the tin shacks. Now this is a very interesting experience I had. Hershey Company was connected with a town in Asanfusu. And this is a little village just maybe an hour or an hour and a half drive from where I was in a Palm. And so the 6th graders of the Milton Hershey School would meet at the Hershey Museum in the chocolate lab, and through Skyping, they would interact with a classroom in this town of Asanfusu. So this is the town in Africa and the teacher. What was really interesting for me, the first time I experienced this, I went to the museum on a Friday and saw the interaction. So I met through Skype the people in Africa. The next day I flew to Africa, and that week I had somebody drive me to this town. I was actually in the classroom talking back to the people in Hershey. And then the next week when I came back to Hershey, I was talking to the people I had met in Africa. I mean, it was a wonderful connection. So I have a little handout here that it's partly the lesson plan. It's called the Distance Learning Program from Hershey. And unfortunately, this is no longer taking place, probably because of all the difficulty with the satellites and the technology of connecting the rooms. But I think it went on for maybe 3 or 4 years. But it was just a wonderful experience. And I know sitting in the classroom in Africa and then looking at the people in Hershey, it was just an amazing coincidence that I was able to be part of that. And this, again, is the classroom. And then here you can see the Hershey group on the Skype screen. Excuse me. So when we took these mission trips, and I don't know if you do this, Pete, with your trips, but we have a lot of young people that are on the trip. We try to create at the end of the trip some kind of a cultural or a tourist type attraction to sort of culminate their wonderful experience, but also give them a taste of the country. So in Africa, we would go to a town called Cape Coast, and there was this canopy walk. And this canopy walk is probably the highest and longest in the world. There are probably 7 of them. They're in Australia, Chile, and all worldwide. But this is the canopy walk, and I don't know how many feet you're above the jungle, but there you are. There I was, but there I am waving. But it's very, I have to say that the first person on the walk is a little hesitant, because here you are in Africa, and you're looking at all these ropes, and you think, oh my gosh, who goes first, But now, I'm sorry. Let me go back. So this is Elamina. This is a castle, and actually this is the site where most of the slave trade came from Africa over to the U.S. And this was a very sobering experience, because we toured through the whole castle, and I remember the last place we saw was the small door. It was a small door, so they had to stoop low to get out, and that was the door of no return, because that was the last door before they left Africa and started their journey to the Caribbean and the U.S. Just an amazing, sobering experience. So here is the capital. This is the White House of Ghana. Ghana was an English colony or under the English control until about 1957, and then they became independent. And like most third world countries, there are areas of just very nice, very special advantage for the people with money, the people in control, and then there are, of course, the areas of poverty. But this was a wonderful experience, and we did this for 8 years. Again, for you that didn't come in right away, the reason that this mission was concluded was because of the Ebola crisis that happened in Africa. And it wasn't in Ghana, but it was close enough that we just didn't think it was right to bring 20 or 30 Americans over to be exposed. But it was just a wonderful experience. And the thing that I particularly appreciated was the fact that we went continuously to the same area every year for 8 years, and we hoped more, but the idea was that we built on the mission that we've started, so it wasn't a hit and miss where we went somewhere. And a lot of times in Rotary, we try to do good work, but we go to one country, do something, and then we go to another country, do something else, but we don't enjoy, or we don't create what I call sustainable mission. Now I'm going to jump, if I may. I hope I may. Yes, India. So India is an interesting country, and it's probably more interesting to us now in this church because Pakistan, our focus area for the PEB, for 300 years was part of the subcontinent of India. I mean, I often marvel when I think of the British controlling India for 300 years when our country's not even 300 years old. So it sort of puts in perspective how long the two countries were united under the British rule. And I was talking to some friends last night. We were hosting Vita at our church at home, and I said that for 300 years, all the different religions in India, the subcontinent, they had a united hatred for England, for the British rule. So whether they were Hindu or Muslim, their hatred was more directed toward the British. And then it wasn't until they separated in August of 1947 that all of a sudden they no longer had the British to hate, so the hatred was unfortunately directed toward the opposite faith. So a book that I read years ago, and I've read it, it's one of the few books I've read a couple of times, called Freedom at Midnight. And it's about the history of India and the separation. And it's amazing how it all happened. Of course, it was after World War II and Gandhi and all the other people, but it was, and they did it at midnight because they were so afraid of what might happen when all the migration would take place, the Hindus leaving the Pakistan area and the Muslims leaving India, go to Pakistan. And unfortunately, if you saw the movie Gandhi, you know the results. Millions were killed passing. I mean, it's just amazing to me that people are getting what they want, and yet they're fighting in the middle of it. And everybody, so the Pakistan people got their country, the Muslims, and they were heading to Pakistan. And of course, the Hindu in Pakistan area were coming back to India, their mother country. And unfortunately, it wasn't a good situation. So this is a mission trip to a Christian school south of Dharmapuri, south of Bangalore, which is the Silicon Valley of India. And I went there maybe 13 years. And during those 13 years, we would go to the same school, and we lived on the campus, and then the actual school was maybe a couple miles away. We go by bus or we could walk. Again, this is the welcome that we received in India. And for those that have been to Pakistan, you'll recognize that it's almost the exact same thing. So the first year I went to Pakistan, I felt, I don't want to say at home, but it was just so familiar because, let's face it, for 300 years, they were the same country and the same culture and the same customs. So all the things that I experienced in Pakistan, I had remembered from my travel and my experience in India. So this, and interestingly, if you look, all the girls are on one side, all the boys on the other side. Even if you go to chapel, the boys are on one side, the girls are, they don't mix. And I don't know if you remember, so Greg and Pete, drums, they love drums. I mean, they love drums in India and they love drums in Pakistan. No matter where you went, every time you were greeted at every school, you had the lineup, but there were drums. And this is where we stayed. We all had rooms, like 2 or 3 people in a room, and it was very, very comfortable. And this is our dining hall, our chapel, and then this is the chapel inside, and you can see no chairs, everybody's on the floor, and boys on one side and girls on the other. And I don't, the boys were always on the left and the girls are on the right. I don't know why, but that's just the way it was. And this is the school where we would go. So the mission trip that we did in India was more or less working in the school itself. There were some medical aspects of it, but I must say that I enjoyed more just being in the school and working with the kids and getting to know the kids. So it was a wonderful maybe 8 days that we were there, and a different combination of things that we did while we were there. So I have the pleasure, since I've retired, of going over to the Milton Hershey School, and I don't know whether I keep telling the teacher that he allows me to do his class, am I disrupting or am I doing something? You know, when I come in, it's a chaos, but I've been there for a long time, and when I started going to India, I thought it'd be a neat idea to try to make a connection with the Milton Hershey School 3rd graders and the kids in India. So the first thing the 3rd graders at Hershey did was they made this booklet for me, and it just, each class, there may be 5 classes, and each class had a little section of Hershey. One would do like the amusement park, one would do something about Mr. and Mrs. Hershey, they talked about the school and whatever. So I could use this book, because when you go to a different country and you're talking to kids, they all want to know about your country. Tell us about your country. And it was, you know, it's easy to get up in front and talk to people, but if you have a little booklet or something that you can show pictures, that's such a big help. So and this book, I used it for about 10 years, it was wonderful. So here I am just talking to the kids, showing them pictures of the book. Now the other thing is, let's see, oh, here I have it. So I've had a lot of cooperation with a lot of people at Hershey, and this is a book called The ABCs of Hershey's Kids. So one of the school teachers at Hershey had made up this coloring book, and that's what it is. So I would take these books over, so I talk about Hershey, then we'd hand out the coloring books, and so one of the banks gave me a whole bunch of crayons one time to take over, so we had crayons for every kid. They did this, and then the teacher that I worked with at Milton Hershey School, he has everything. So he had all these stickers. So, you know, kids love stickers. So a lot of them went on their wrist or their face or wherever, but they were everywhere. But a lot of them ended up with their coloring books. And then after we did the coloring books, I think I have, yeah. So you can't go to India or any place when you're from Hershey without some kind of Hershey candy. So after all of this experience, then we gave them the kissables, and the funny thing was I would take over the red licorice sticks, the Twizzlers, and because I was talking about Hershey and chocolate, they all thought that was chocolate. They thought, oh, I want some of your chocolate. And now when you're over in India, so I'm Tom Uncle because I'm a man, and a woman would be, my sister would come with us sometimes, and she was Linda Auntie. So, Tom Uncle, I like that chocolate. You know, it was really not chocolate. And then so the other thing we did was I thought it'd be fun to engage the kids in Hershey with the kids in India in the form of a pen pal letter. And so this was, I have to be honest, this was my idea, and I talked to the teachers at Hershey to see if they would go along with this, because there are a lot of restrictions when you're dealing with Hershey. And one thing was taking pictures, because not everybody, their parents didn't want their picture out and whatever, but we did arrange it that we could have the kids at Hershey write a pen pal letter, and I'd attach a picture, two pictures to the letter. And so we go over to India, and so we would have the teachers write on the board, and then the kids would write the same letter, and then we'd have a form, so to speak, of, so my name is, I'm studying in, standard would be what grade, so it's like 10th standard, 9th standard, and the school that I was attending, that we worked with, only went up to 10th grade, so if they went on to 11th and 12th, they had to go to the government schools. But then again, it's just my favorite movie, my favorite sport, all that stuff. And then they could add, and even draw a picture if they wanted. But it was just fun to do this. And then here we had a whole class where everybody was writing, these are the pen pal letters from Hershey, and then they would write back. And so I would, at the end, they would bring their letter that they wrote. I'd take a picture of them so that I could take the pen pal letter that they wrote back to the child at Hershey with the picture of the kid in India that wrote the pen pal letter. It sounds very confusing, but I'm organized, and after a couple of years of making a mess of it, I got it, I got it right, and so I had all these people helping me. It was great. But so we could do, I think we did like 80 to 100 letters at this one time. So trying to organize, and then you had like 80 letters, but you had 5 classrooms, and I said to each teacher, you have to have a different stationery so I can figure out who's who, so I don't want all the stationery to be the same, so we had each one try to do something different with their stationery so I could at least group them that way. But it was just a fun thing, and what was fun was the kids liked it, and because it's your idea, you always think it's a great idea, but I came back to coming back to Hershey, and I'd see kids like they were in 6th grade or 7th grade, and they said, Dr. Tom, I still have my pen pal picture, they'll keep their wallet, their purse. Yes, it was a good idea. So, okay, so that was the fun part of the school, but then they also entertained us, and it seemed like every night they have cultural dances and just the beautiful costumes, and I have to say the children were beautiful. They were absolutely stunning. And here's the colors of India, green, white, and orange. And these kids did this crazy dance. But all sorts of stuff symbolizing India. And when we're over, so we go there in January. And in January, they have in this area a festival called Pongal. And Pongal, to me, is sort of like our Thanksgiving. It's a time when the families get together and celebrate their families and with special food. But they really, I think, they do it, overboard. They've got Christmas lights all over the place, and in front of every house they have all this beautiful drawing. This is all freehand with chalk. And they just, I don't know how they do it. I watched them do it. I couldn't do it. But so in front of every house they've got this. So in the area where we were at school, they had a mini Pongal celebration so we could experience the different parts of Pongal. So the different foods they ate, and then the crazy thing is, they have India, they're into cows, and so part of Pongal was decorating the cows, and they would be balloons on their horns and all. The first time I saw it, I thought, I can't believe this. What's going on? But this was just part of the deal. And then of course they made all these mugs and did all the decorating. But just a wonderful experience in one afternoon to experience their 4 days of Pongal. And the other part of this was this is Paravasa Ulagam. It's a water park. And we took maybe 30 kids each year. And we sponsor, we meaning the people that are on the trip, I've sponsored maybe 10 kids in India. And I've been there long enough that I must say that I know that some of my kids I'm still in touch with them, but they've graduated from medical school or going to medical school or whatever. So you're taking kids from a poverty area and with just really not that much to live for, but they are getting this great education through this school. And it's just so important when you hear about education. We hear it from Vida in Pakistan, but everywhere in the third world countries, and probably everywhere, education is so key that when people are educated, it's just a whole different world of opportunities the rest of their life. And for me, to see the kids that I've met in India, and I've been to their homes, grass shacks, just horrible places, and here they're doctors now. It's just unbelievable that through this education, they've been able to make a better life for themselves. But there's just a fun day in the park. There's a wave pool. Let's see what else. Oh, a waterfall shower. So it's just fun to be out and just have fun with the kids in a place like this. So once again, as I mentioned in our trips to Africa, India is such a huge place and there's so much to see. We try each year to do something different. And this is the palace at Mysore, one of the great palaces of India. And I mean, so India, you have the absolute extremes of places like this and then abject poverty. But it's just unbelievable to see. This is a Maharaja's palace. And I still marvel when I see it. But then all the ornate carvings with all their different gods and goddesses. At the cow again. This is in Mumbai, and we stayed in. So in the beginning, we used to stay at really miserable places, and then we got the idea that we'll go and be good at the mission, but we deserve a nice trip sometime. We need a hot shower. We need good water. So at the end of the trip, we would treat ourselves, and this was the Taj Hotel is right behind here. And I don't know if you remember, but in Thanksgiving, I'm going to say maybe 20 years ago, or no, it couldn't be that long, maybe 10 years ago, there was a terrorist attack in that hotel over Thanksgiving. So we had stayed at that hotel, but always felt safe. This is the gateway of India, and this was the gateway they built for King George's visit in 1916, I think it was. And it's also the gateway that the British left in 1947. So there's the top. Oh, wait, whoa. Yeah, so there's the gateway, and there's the Taj Hotel. And I mean, it's magnificent. It's just a beautiful building, and it's nice inside, too. And I must say, I have been to the Taj Mahal probably 5 times, and I think that, I say that only to tell you that every time I go, it's like the first time I've been there. It's magical. I mean, you can't see it from the outside. It's all gated. So you all are gathered and through this one gate. Then, so our guide, close your eyes, I'll tell you when to open, and then you open your eyes and you see this, and it's just like, wow, So there are so many wonders of the world that are nice. I remember going to San Antonio to see the Alamo, and the Alamo is a place where you could just walk right by and miss it because it's just in the middle of downtown. Yet all the postcards, it looks like it's all separate, and it looks really great, but oh my gosh, it's hard. I mean, it's the symbolism is great, but my gosh, it's just, you can walk right by. It's just so ordinary. But this is not ordinary. This is absolutely spectacular. It's stunning. Oh, okay, I guess I'm finished with the slides. I was hoping that Vita would be here so that she could talk about Pakistan, but I'm here, so I'll talk about it. And so as I mentioned early on, I went with Debbie a couple of years before a group of us went, and the amazing thing to me was, so Pakistan to me was like forbidden fruit. It was like, you can't go there, but I want to go there, And so when Vita came and talked about Pakistan and made it more possible to go there, I remember telling Debbie, next time you go, I'm on, I just want to see it. And so I read about Lahore, because Lahore, when the two countries were together, Lahore was the garden city of India, and in the summertime, all the British elite would go to Lahore because it was cooler and just absolutely stunningly beautiful. So I had you guys aware that Lahore was the beautiful city of India. and now Pakistan. But it was fun because we would go to the different schools like Vida tells us when we're over there and when we're with her, all the different schools. And every school welcome was so similar. I mean, again, the lineup, boys on one side, girls on the other side, the drums, and I thought, I'm back home, you know, it's just, I've been here before. But it's just a great experience, and I think over and over, we hear the importance of education. And in Pakistan, of course, because it is a Muslim country, the women don't have the same opportunities that they would in another country. And I think one of the things that all of us are proud of is our support of the Christian education that the Presbyterian Education Board through Pakistan is providing for the women and giving them an opportunity to have a wonderful, a better life. And even the poorer women are connected with learning skills and things that will allow them to have some kind of an occupation that will help them survive and continue. So I just think that we are so blessed. Number one, Vida is just somebody that to meet her is to just be overwhelmed with her faith, her trust, and she's just a wonderful person, and she has sort of been like the Messiah, the leader of this ongoing education event and experience in Pakistan. And I was hoping that I'd stopped early enough that she would be here to talk, but she's not here. So what I'm going to do is, we do have time, but I'll be glad to answer any questions, or if what Pete or Lois want to share the experiences that we all enjoyed together when we were in Pakistan. I'd love to hear your thoughts or any ideas. So I'll just open it up for any comments that you might want to make.
Can you speak to to Pakistan politically, what their influences are?
Oh, I probably shouldn't at all. I mean, the problem, so I will say something. As I mentioned earlier, for 300 years, the subcontinent of India was united in their hatred for Britain. So what happened in 1947 was all of a sudden that hatred for Britain was no longer an issue. So the hatred was then directed toward the opposing religion. As I mentioned, Hindu in India and Muslim in Pakistan. And it was just so unfortunate, but that's just the way it was. I remember reading something, in India, there are two common things: their love for cricket and their hatred for Pakistan. Today, this is what their feeling is. And how many wars have we read about with India and Pakistan? They're continuously, it's hard to believe they were united in their hatred of England for 300 years, and then when they separated, it just became bizarre. So going back now, in 1947, the government of Pakistan, they were a brand new country. They had to organize a government, they had to organize a military, all sorts of things. So my thought is that for 25 years, they were so busy building and creating a new nation that they didn't have time to pay attention to the work that the Christian missionaries were doing. They were continuing to do the work that had been started way before, back in the 1800s, before the country was divided. So when it was divided, my thought is the government was so busy, they just didn't pay any attention. They had more things on their mind than to worry about Christian missionaries teaching Christianity and educating women and boys in Pakistan. So my thought is that I think it was in 1972, maybe 25 years later, they all of a sudden got the idea, hey, we're a Muslim nation and we're letting all these Christian people teach our children. So we'll take over the schools. We're going to just, get rid of them, send them away, and we'll do it. But interestingly, in my opinion, and I think I get this from Vida, that after so many years, the government realized that they weren't educating the same way as effectively as the Christian missionaries. So they actually started to turn back some of the schools to the missionaries, because a lot of the people in government had actually grown up through these schools. And they realized that the reason where they were was because of this wonderful education provided by the Christians. And so I think they then began the process of turning these schools back. And so now we have a new phase where the missionaries are getting the land that was taken from them recovered, but unfortunately, for neglect and disrepair, a lot of the schools that they're getting back need a lot of infrastructure help and whatever, so that there's a lot of money going into rebuilding the schools that were there. But it's a powerful mission, and to see, I guess what I like is, so I'm going to Milton Hershey School, and it's not a good segue or comparison, because Milton Hershey kids have their own problems that they, because of where they come from, to get into the school. But when I go to India, when I go to Pakistan, and I see the kids in the class, they pay attention. They are, and it's amazing how well behaved they are. I mean, even better than our schools. I mean, they're just, because these kids are just thriving on education, and it means so much to them. I don't know, but so the government, I don't know if the government really knows. Honestly, it's such a confused government, I think, and they've had dictatorships, they've had presidents, I mean, all forms of government. I think now it's a little bit better than it was, but I know they've had military dictatorships. And of course, a lot of the money in their budget went to the military, because they were always at war with India, and they're still at war in the Kashmir area. I mean, that's an area that was never addressed properly in the division, and it's probably one of the most beautiful places on earth, in the mountains and whatever. So every country, India and Pakistan, they're always fighting over this Kashmir area. My solution, if they ever ask me, I'd make it a UNESCO site, get everybody out, but just let the United Nations handle it, and I think that, to me, would be the only solution. But I mean, it'll never be India's, it'll never be Pakistan's. So it's such a special place on earth that it's a shame that we can't go there. That's, you know, other than Pakistan, that was my next dream, to get to Kashmir, but I know not now. I don't know if that answered your question.
Oh, yeah,
That's sort of the situation. It's a third world country. They're dealing with poverty. They're dealing with debt that, you know, we think we have a big national debt. I mean, Pakistan, last night, Vita was sharing with us that the percentage of their annual income for the government is devoted to paying off the IMF because of all the money they borrowed. And so they just don't have that much money to do things. And that's why people like us, our church, can really step in and really help the people that need the help, the young kids. I mean, to me, we all believe that we can do something for the youth, that will be the future of the country. We'll get them educated, they'll know what the difference between right and wrong. And the interesting thing is that in these schools that we're promoting, and now I'm going back to Pakistan, and actually even India, the education is so valuable that a lot of Muslim families send their children to these schools in Pakistan because of the value of education. Now, I understand that if a Muslim child is going to a Christian school in India or in Pakistan, they can be excused from the religious aspect of the education. So they're not, so the teachers, the people in charge of the schools are so smart that they want to encourage education, not necessarily the religious part of it. So they encourage these other children of other religions to come without being, I don't want to say brainwashed, but they can be excused from that aspect of the religious aspect of the education. And actually the same thing in India, where we are, because it's a very strongly Hindu area and we're a small Christian school, that the same thing takes place. A lot of the Hindu families send their children to this Christian matrix school because of the value of the education.
I was thinking about that, about the kids getting a really good education, being respectful of getting a good education, which made me think in the future, it'd be nice to think that these children, when they grow up, will have a positive influence. And number two, I was going to ask, what sort of percentage, if you know, of kids are well educated, or and how many aren't educated in that countries?
Oh, Jack, that's not a fair question. I have no clue. I couldn't even venture a guess.
Yeah.
But all I can say is that we're doing the best we can to educate as many people as we can for the future. I mean, it's really, we're educating for the future.
Sure.
Are you familiar with Dr. Mortel, the doctor from Haiti, who just recently passed away? But I worked with him, and I actually went to Haiti with him a couple of times. And so the first time, I mean, I knew him through medical associations and everything, but I'll never forget his telling me that, Tom, I'm educating these children in Haiti so they will grow up and overthrow the government. So basically, the government is so corrupt that the only way he felt that they could make a change was to get these kids educated, to know right from wrong, and get rid of the government. So maybe that's what they're doing over in Pakistan or whatever. But it's education. I mean, all we're talking about this morning is education. And I think sometimes we just take it for granted because we have so many avenues here. We're so blessed with so many pathways to different education. And then you look at a third world country or countries that we've been visiting, and you realize how, to me, education is so key. It's so key. And I just feel comfortable that we as a church are supporting the education, and I guess you're familiar with the fact that we are supporting through the church a boys wing in Saragota. And again, I just feel I'm so proud of what we're doing, what the church is doing to provide this education for kids. You had a question back there, I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, I think other people probably already know the answer, but what is our specific relationship with the school? You said we're supporting a boys wing in Saragossa. Like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? I think a couple things. Actually, the more I think about it, a lot of things. So the first thing I'll say is we're providing scholarships. So I don't know, in church this morning, Bill and Cindy, the youth that had gone to Pakistan with Vita, were talking about the scholarships for children in India that we support. I think, maybe Pete can tell me, but I think the church supports a number, but I think individuals support on their own a number of individual scholarships. And when it's not just a scholarship, but you actually get to know the name of your student that you're supporting. You'll get a letter and a picture, so it's a more personal thing. It's not like just sending money and you have no clue where it's going. You get a direct relationship with a person, if you wish, a boy or a girl or whatever. And I think I'm correct, but to support a day student, it is $400 a year. And to support a boarding student, because in Saragota there is a dormitory boarding place for women. And to support a woman in this dormitory, an overnight, not a day student, is $800. So there are opportunities. And then I'll go even further, since you brought up the subject, that if you, I don't want to say if you can't afford, but if you're not comfortable with supporting a $400 or $800, you can buy what we call a share. So a share might be like $40, and you could buy one share, and that would be 1/10 of a day student scholarship, where you could do $80, and that would be 1/10 of a boarding student's scholarship. So there are different ways that you can support financially scholarships. That's one aspect of this. And then again, as I mentioned, we have this mission. I guess I call it a mission, but this drive to build and pay for the construction of a boys' wing at one of these schools in Saragota. So that it just and then the other thing that we just recently learned, that whenever you have a big compound like this area and all the buildings, you need, in this particular area, you need security. And also you have people that are involved with cooking. So Charlie knows all about this. And we have, we have a cooking crew, so to speak. And we're being asked if we can to try to help send some money over to maintain this security staff and the people that provide the food for the children while they're at school. And I understand from conversations that some of the areas where they're currently being housed are not really the best places, and they really need a more solid building, safe building. It's not, the roof isn't leaking when it rains and things like that. So that's another ask that we're being considering, that we could help, in addition to the boys' school, to help support the staff that are taking care of the kids, security and feeding the kids. So does that help?
Yeah, it's helpful, thank you.
And I think, I think they're going to have trips periodically to Pakistan, and I know it's a stretch for a lot of people. First of all, it's a long flight. On mission trips, unfortunately, you always fly economy. I mean, that's just the deal, and it's even longer economy than it is in any other area of the plane. But it's worth it. I mean, it's just when you see the kids that you are with and the joy that you bring. Even if, I mean, you just have to be there, and the kids just think you're great. I mean, you don't have to do anything, but they just think, wow, he came all the way from America to see me, and they take it very personally, and it makes you feel, I mean, you can get a real big ego very quickly if you don't watch out. But I mean, they are just so pleased and gratified that you would take the time from your life in America and share their life in their country. Any other questions?
Just a related question. You mentioned that the families feel that the education is very important for the kids. Do the kids mirror that attitude?
I would say
Are
yes,
they-
and
are
I
they-
would ask Lois and Pete to confirm, because I think one of the things I was trying to make earlier was just comparing students in schools in America versus the children that we've witnessed in Pakistan and myself in India. They are amazingly well behaved. I mean, if the teacher walks in the room, they all stand up. It's just, the respect is just overwhelming. And you sort of think, oh my gosh, how can they do it in this country with all this, confusion and whatever? But the kids are just, they are, I would say they are thriving and thirsty for education. I don't want to make it, too, overwhelming, but it's true. They know, I think, through their parents and through their teachers, that this is the way that they can make a better life for themselves. It's so key. I don't think the kids, well, that's not true, but I don't think the kids in America take it that seriously of the difference it makes in their life, that it does make a difference in these countries.
Just a thought, here in America, there's so many distractions for children. Where there, I would think education is a big thing because they don't have all the distractions we have here.
They don't have the books, they don't have the iPads, they don't have the access to social media, fortunately, and so the school experience is key. It really is.
Different kind of question.
Okay.
Oops,
Pete,
I'm
sorry.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, let Pete answer.
Yeah.
The one thing we asked about the kids is if they're all seated, if the teacher left the room and went and did something else and came back, all the kids were still sitting in their seats.
It was
Nobody
remarkable.
Nobody was up, and they had all kind of displays, things, science exhibits and that they wanted us to see, and that,
They were so enthusiastic, weren't they?
Yes,
Just
yeah.
really, enthusiasm was one word I'd use to describe the situation.
the education, I think the Martin Park, there's two big plaques on each side of the wall, starting from the 70s or something like that. When they're in India, they have a national exam, so the kid with the highest score got his name put on the board. Two things, one of them, with one of the guys was showing us around, I think he was the head of the brick factory or something,
Yeah.
said, there's my name on the board. But the scores are like when the PEB had control of them and that, it was like 400, 500, 600, 700 and that. Then when the government took over and that, the scores were like 200, 300. After 98, backed up 600, 700. And one kid had hit 1,000 about a year or so before. That, we just saw the effect of the education, the quality of the education going on then. What the thing Vita mentioned last night was like 76%, I think, of Pakistan's budget goes for paying interest.
The
to
IMF,
and
right.
that. 16% goes to the military, leaves them 8% to cover
To run the country.
for the rest of the country. So education gets, well, essentially nothing, you know.
That's the sad part. I mean, I always, it's a shame that from the very beginning, the military unfortunately took so much of their budget, and then they had to borrow money, which then left them in the situation where this 67 or whatever the number is to the IMF paying off their interest. But I mean, the sad thing is that India and Pakistan just don't like each other. And it's funny, for 300 years, they were one country, and it's just amazing. You had another question?
So I know you said that you have kept up with some of the students that you've sponsored personally. Does the program track kids, or do you do anything for the kids after they finish the primary school, when they go into the government school? Do they continue to get sponsored in some way to help them make sure that they can get through there and into
I guess,
the college system?
yeah, I guess it would be of a more personal thing, because I have maybe 5 kids that email me periodically that in India, and to be honest with you, a lot of times the emails are, "Uncle, I need money," you know. So I tell them that, you know, I'm a friend, but I don't give money away like that. I do it to the school, but not to individuals. It's just not right to single one person out. So I encourage them in what they're doing. I take pride in their successes, but I just say, look, you know, I'll do everything I can, but don't ask for money, because it's just not a good thing. So that's my experience in India. I don't think we've developed that kind of a relationship yet with the scholarship students. Now, maybe some of the individual people that have scholarship students and they're corresponding with these students, they develop a relationship. I don't have a scholarship student in Pakistan, but I more concentrate on the ones I had in India. So it's possible that these relationships may develop over the years with the people here that are sponsoring students, and they keep this sponsorship up year after year, that they'll be part of their life, really. How are we doing?
Yeah, oh, good, we have about 2 minutes on this.
Come on, Pete, tell me something. Lois, you haven't said anything. Come on, tell us about your impression.
But I think when you stop to think about it, we were told that the Christians represent only 2% of the population of Pakistan. 2%. And even if you are educated, you have a fight to get a position of any power, influence, or importance, even with an education. But take that away from them, and they are back making bricks that we saw in brickyards, of men stooping down, making bricks out of clay for a half penny per brick. And they hoped that by the end of the day, they had made $10. But that's with the help of another family member. So when you think of the abject poverty that we've given these children a chance to, at least, if you can't make professor level, you at least are somewhere in education, or as a teacher, as yourself, as a graduate of our program, or you might get into nursing. You may not become a doctor immediately, but hopefully then your child will be. Once you've given an education to a person, it's a ticket at least that opens a few doors. And hopefully those doors will open more doors for your children. It's a stepping stone, and they know that. But they are not making bricks. They are not. Some of the children's their fathers were listed, their occupations, street sweepers. I'm talking about brooms. So that the government would pay them pennies a day to sweep the streets. And we saw that abject poverty as we drove. People would just flock to our cars to try to get close to us. They realized we were symbols of education and wealth from another country. So we are opening doors that are small. We are opening windows, but the ones who receive it are so grateful. The glimmer of light and hope are there. That would be there for them.
It's interesting what Lois said. Let's say two women are applying for the same job. One is a Christian and one is a Muslim. Unfortunately, there's no competition because the Muslim woman would get the job regardless of credentials and qualifications. It's just the way it is. But the more we educate, the more opportunities, I think that will be less and less. It's hopeful that the government will realize that they just have to be more inclusive, and even though it is a Muslim country, to survive in the world, they have to be more inclusive. That's my hope, my desire, but I don't know if I've any pull with the government in Pakistan yet.
I was going to ask a question about, different kind of question. What's the water like there?
Well, okay, so anybody that's been on a mission trip, it doesn't matter where you are, one of the joys of the mission trip is when you come home and you can get in the shower and turn on hot water, and you can open the tap water, put your toothbrush under the tap water, and scrub your teeth. I mean, I see smiles around, but honestly, it is incredible. I mean, so wherever I've gone, you just don't ever touch the water. I mean, you live out of bottled water, and you avoid any kind of contact with tap water. But I must say that the first night home, that hot shower, you just turn on the spigot, there it is, it's not